Hello, this is Ann Fordori, and I am on the music faculty of the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and I'm also privileged to be the president of the board of directors of the Kearney Symphony Orchestra. And this is another one in the continuing series of our intermission interviews that you can enjoy in between the sections of the concert from December 7th. And I have two guests I'm speaking to this evening. The first is Dr. Charles Bicak, who I kidded with earlier. I said he has the longest title on campus, Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, and has a long history with KSO as a supporter, a patron, a subscriber, a music enthusiast, and also has some great reminiscence of his mother's involvement with the orchestra during the 1960s. Good evening.
Good evening, Ann. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So let's talk a little bit first about KSO and your relationship to KSO and your support, which has been over many, many years. Why you think KSO is of value to the university and the Kearney community.
Well, yes, Ann. To me, KSO is that very special, and it may seem a little bit unusual, combination of a respite from the daily routine, the weekly routine, the hustle and bustle of our lives, but at the same time, it's a stimulant. It causes me to think differently, as I'm sure it causes many in our audience to think differently about their place in the world. And it's so important to have that breadth of exposure and breadth of opportunity across the academic disciplines that are offered on a campus and the richness of the world around us, including right here in our Kearney community.
And I think one of the most unusual things about the orchestra that I have mentioned time and again, and I'm sure you'll agree, is it combines the talents of community members, professional musicians, faculty, and students. So it's unique in its place in Nebraska, and as Kearney's oldest performing arts organization, more than 100 years old.
Indeed, and I have a little bit of personal experience with that. When it comes to the combination of community members, students, faculty, the special nature of the Kearney Symphony Orchestra, that takes me back to thinking about 1962, which is the year that I first moved to Kearney. Being a slow learner, I've come and gone from here 2 or 3 times, sometimes for as long as nearly 20 years, but there's a certain attraction that draws one back. We moved here when I was a child in 1962. 10 years old, which happened to be the same year that Dr. Gerald Fees, moved to Kearney. And Gerald was subsequently conductor of the symphony for upwards of 24 or 25 years. And to this day, Connie Moon, his daughter, is so talented and so in front in leading as a violinist in the orchestra. My earliest memories of music, classical, if not otherwise, really date to the mid-1950s. I was thinking about this as we began to speak. And Tubby the Tuba in the mid-1950s was one of those intriguing scenarios for a young boy to think about what is it instruments are all about and what is it they produce in the end. And they produce an awesome, remarkable insight into the world around us as well as internally to ourselves.
I asked you earlier, and we spoke for a moment about what were some of the more memorable, maybe memorable recent performances of the orchestra that you can comment on, and anything come to mind? Anything's come to mind now?
Well, certainly, and one performance that really stands out to me in recent memory, as we all tend to think now at this time about pre- and post-pandemic circumstances. It was February 2020, late February 2020, and I had the honor and opportunity to be the orator for the Lincoln Portrait.
Which is a great work.
A remarkable work, and it always causes me one of those shivers of realization about our country and who we are. And so that stands out. It was a remarkable experience and a grand opportunity. And even as recently as the early fall 2021, last month, here, October performance that included Peer Gynt, that stands out in my mind as well. So each time there are tremendous works, and they cause me to leave being better for it.
I think one of the things I like about KSO's programming, Dr. Gaines finds works that are at the talent level and development level for the musicians who are playing. So she challenges them, but keeps things within the grasp to perform in an 8-week period. before we have a concert. I was thinking recently, too, of the concert last spring when Joshua Witovic, who was the violinist soloist, had won the concerto competition the year before and then couldn't perform because we had closed everything down for COVID in the spring, played the last movement of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto and really, as they would say, set the house on fire.
Indeed he did, yes, yeah.
You mentioned something earlier about your mother performing with the orchestra. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My mother performed in the early, mid-'60s through a time in which performances were held in the old administration building on this campus. At that time, there was no fine arts building. There were limited facilities in Copeland Hall, limited facilities in Thomas Hall. Bruner Hall did not exist, so that gives you a different view of the quad area around the bell tower in the center of campus. So that building housed the auditorium in which the symphony performed, along with the other of arts and humanities and the natural and social sciences. She was a violinist. She played many years through the 60s. There were 5 of us in the family, and there were continued additions in brothers and sisters to the family. I'm the oldest. And so she took a respite or a time out, but then returned and saw the transition from that old administration building auditorium to the recital hall and the fine arts building through the early to mid-'70s.
I'm always amazed to see, even in the 28 years I have been here, how the campus has grown. And one of the stories Ron Crocker likes to tell is that the original conductor of KSO was also the football coach. And the first concert of the season had to coordinate with the ending of the football season. So people wearing many hats and providing many services for the university.
Indeed, that was the case historically, and I would say it's the case today. And you and so many others wear multiple hats, just as you're doing this evening. And these are important to the betterment of the campus, to the betterment, in this instance, certainly culturally, of our community.
Well, thank you for speaking with us this evening, and we look forward to the second half of the concert tonight.
Thank you, Ann.
This is Ann Fordori, and I'm back speaking during our intermission interviews with Dr. Alison Gaines, who is the music director and conductor of the Kearney Symphony Orchestra. And we're speaking about the theme of this concert, which is classic traditions. And I'm sure that informed many of the pieces you chose, and maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that in the first half, and then I have questions about the second half of the concert we will hear next.
Well, in the first half, one of the most recognizable traditions honored on this particular concert is the playing of the Radetzky March, which generally you hear on the Vienna Philharmonic New Year's Eve concert every year. And it's fun because it's become such an audience participation thing. It's great that that is an aspect and kind of a tradition for Kearney Symphony's holiday concert, is singing along or clapping.
As long as they clap on 1 and 3.
Right, well,
Yeah.
we hope. Even I heard one concert there was conducting, and, so the idea of the audience being part of the experience is a really nice feature that seems to happen every time we have a holiday concert.
Which is great, and of course the march from Babes in Toyland, which is also a familiar work.
I love that work. It has such a great shape to it. It's got an interesting form, and it builds up to such a wonderful, exciting point and goes out sort of as stealthily as it comes in. It's so evocative that you can picture at the beginning with the, stealthy beginning. You can picture midnight. The toys are all crawling out of their box, and then they have sort of a parade or a ceremony of some kind. And then maybe day breaks, and they all climb back in at the end. It's such a evocative piece. And to be honest, that composer, Victor Herbert, you don't hear his music that often, and he was so popular in his time.
I think a lot of the music on this concert, like that piece from Babes in Toyland and what we're going to speak of in the second part of the concert, are such well-known programmatic pieces. They tell a story, even if the story is not actual and they're, as you said, evocative for the audience to figure out what's going on. They're a great part of the storytelling. So let's jump for a second to the second half of the concert and talk about this great programming you have of 4 of the characteristic dances from the Nutcracker, played by the orchestra, and then also played by UNK's Jazz Rock Ensemble under the direction of Dr. Tim Farrell. Can you tell us what led to this programming?
Well, I stole the idea from someone else. Apparently, several other orchestras have done this, but I actually played a holiday concert, maybe 2 years ago outside of Chicago that did this, and I won't say I'd never heard the Ellington ones, but I certainly hadn't heard his version in many, many years. And hearing it again, I thought, I have got to do that because both the Tchaikovsky and the Ellington are such wonderful pieces of music, so beautifully crafted in their orchestration, and so completely different in their approach. I find both of them endlessly fascinating.
And can you tell us a little bit about the four particular dances that you're going to do, and that people who are familiar with the Nutcracker may recognize those when you mention those?
On the first half, we're sneaking in the march from the Nutcracker suite that we're doing on our own. But then in the second half, I believe we're opening with...
The Sugar Plum Fairies?
We
perhaps?
might be opening with Sugar Plum. It's funny, Duke Ellington's take on it is so sort of creepy in a way. It's very strange, and I wonder if some of that was inspired by the sound of the celeste. And actually, the celeste was a fairly new instrument, really. Hardly anyone had written for it when it was invented, and Tchaikovsky made a point of putting this new instrument into his work. But I wonder if that, kind of spooky sound of the original Ellington takes it a whole nother step. And that's true of many of the movements. The sultriness of the Arabian dance, the spirit of that is so well translated into 20th century jazz by Ellington. The Chinese dance, also a unique take, but comes from the same place, that kind of joyous place. And Waltz of the Flowers is just such a epic. It's kind of epic. And when you
I think it's the longest of those dances, too.
By far. And when you see the Nutcracker, that's sort of the closer of the two young characters' time in Candyland. That's like the finale. And it has the most dancers and some of the flashiest choreography and costumes. And Ellington definitely gives it its due.
And the orchestration, there's some overlap, of course, but there's very different orchestration. So can you tell us any difference between the Tchaikovsky and the Ellington in terms of how it's the instrumentation?
Well, even though the saxophone was actually invented by Adolph Sax in the 1800s, so it theoretically could have been used in the Nutcracker, but there aren't any saxophones. And, of course, Ellington's version has about 4, and the lead saxophone part is really a beautifully written part, and we're so fortunate in Kearney to have fine musicians in the community, not only in the orchestra, but jazz musicians. So Dr. Farrell ended up bringing in a local wonderful sax player named Chris Stelling.
Who's a UNK graduate.
There you go.
As a matter of fact.
And his brother is actually playing bass in the concert as well with the orchestra. So we're so fortunate to have people like that, and I can't wait to hear Chris play the sax 1 parts.
So it's going to be crowded on stage with 2 groups.
Very much so. We have sort of shifted, so the orchestra will look a little off kilter to make room for the jazz band, and they've changed their configuration too, instead of a block to more of a wedge. Hopefully everyone will have enough elbow room. There are several players who are in both groups, and they're going to have to be going back and forth. And once again, we're really lucky to have the talent that we have here at the school and in the community.
Well, we look forward to that on the second half. And what holiday concert would be complete without some kind of carol sing-along? So that's last on the concert. And can you tell us anything we have to look forward to and that we should be warming up our pipes for in the second half?
Well, there's 4 very standard carols. I won't spoil the surprise, but the words will be in the program, so there will be no excuses. This particular arrangement starts sort of big and loud and kind of fast, and it actually ends kind of slowly and quietly with Silent Night. But I thought that might be nice, to, after ending the first half with that up feeling of the Radetzky, to leave us all with a little more pensive feeling as we head out to our holidays and, look forward to seeing our loved ones.
And it's been quite a year from, the spring of 2020 of having to cancel the last concert, to the fall of 2020 of performing an outdoor concert, to December of 2021 getting to perform live again and actually having two groups on the stage. So we're grateful for our ongoing support from the Kearney community, that they have trusted us, and we have overseen all our COVID precautions that we need to take to make it safe for the audience to be here. Something else I just want to mention, as people hear this tonight, we have just completed a successful Give Where You Live campaign that ended on the 2nd of December. However, that doesn't mean you can't still contribute to KSO before the end of the performance, and before the end of the calendar year. And I think we have envelopes available to concert goers in their programs, so that if they missed Give Where You Live, they can still make a donation to KSO before the tax man comes. So anything else you want to tell the listeners to think about for the second half of the concert?
No, just enjoy that beautiful variety that we're so lucky to have in music. And do enjoy checking out Kearney's local talent.
Good. Well, thank you, Dr. Gaines, and onward to the second half of the concert.
Thank you.